Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers.
Brewer fans, welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast. My name's Craig. Joining me today is my co-host Vince. Vince, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Craig. How are you?
Doing all right. 2024 is here, and we're looking forward to the Brewers baseball season, or just baseball season in general, coming up here. As I know, we're counting down the days to start of spring training, and unfortunately, we're as Brewer fans waiting for some key pickups and possibly re-imaging of the current roster, and that doesn't seem to be happening much. So. Again, This is maybe par for the course. For if you've been following the Brewers for the last several years, even though they've been competitors who have made the playoffs like 5 of the last 6 years, they seem to be really sitting on their hands for a good portion of the free agency schedule, so to speak, and then waiting for some possible bargains to pop up, and then kind of jumping in at the last minute. Do you feel like we're on that same course this year?
Yeah, unfortunately I do, Craig. And yeah, it's kind of funny for many of our listeners, or as I'm sure that many of them know, we try to tape, every week or maybe every 2 weeks. And we put out an episode, what was it, like, last week, I think 7 or 8 days ago. And I know in our pre-production meeting, you and I were talking about our taping this week, and we both sort of realized that literally nothing has happened since our last episode. So unfortunately, we're not coming to you with any breaking news, but I guess that we'll take this opportunity to in my case at least, vent a bit about the Brewers' lack of activity this offseason. I will say that I don't think that we're done. I would be shocked if we don't do anything. But my concern is pretty much what you just said, Craig, that that the Brewers have kind of shown in the past that they are more reactive than proactive, and we've talked about that. Gosh, it seems like for the last 4 or 5 off seasons. And my concern is that we go into the off season with a general plan, and we don't actually act until prices drop below a certain amount. The problem becomes you get a lesser version sometimes of what you should be getting, and then we end up with the Jackie Bradley Juniors of the world in our outfield. And I'm concerned that there's going to be less pickings to go around sooner rather than later here. And I know that it's been a kind of a slow offseason to develop overall for baseball, but it does seem like a lot of teams have been way more active than Milwaukee has. And I know we don't have a ton of holes to fill, but I do still think that we need, at least some starting pitching depth, at least another bullpen arm, and most definitely 100%, we need a first baseman or a third baseman. I think you can kind of fill one of the two internally a little bit with Tyler Black, but we got to get at least one of those two positions filled externally, in my opinion.
Yeah, I wanted to believe that we actually need both. But the other guy is our unsung hero from last year, at least I guess that's my pick. Andrew Monasterio did do a fairly decent job to earn regular playing time last year, filling in. But I still think he really is better suited for a super utility role rather than a starting gig on a contending team, at least. And that's what I still consider the Brewers until I see otherwise. So I don't understand. Again, it's par for course, and it's very frustrating. I just don't understand if you're a GM of a team and you know the free agents ahead of time. You know the teams or the players around the league that possibly could be on a trade block. You know which one of your guys are trying to be moving and whatnot. And it just seems like as soon as the free off-season hits and the free agency opens, you should really be, trying to take a shot for your guys, or like to try to have a game plan. It seems like we really don't. It's more like, okay, well, here's our roster. There's a couple holes we need to fill, but we'll just wait till everything else shakes out. We'll wait till all the people with money in the league take all their favorite players and all the good players, and then we'll see, what's left in the bargain bin, so to speak, and we'll see who's willing to sign for a 1-year deal. And I get not wanting to, throw out really stupid 5-6 year contracts to players that will basically dampen for a small market team. Some of those contracts are just way too risky. With that being said, I think that there's other tiers of like a 2 or 3 year free agent, even the sign like the Reds just made and Jameer Candelario for third base. I mean, why couldn't he have been an option for us? I think I signed like a 3-year deal with them at a fairly reasonable rates, and I just feel like why weren't we in on that? I mean, maybe we were and we came in second. But for some reason I doubt it. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah, and
uh,
he's actually another guy too. In his case particularly, he's another guy that I thought the Brewers should have been targeting at the trade deadline last July as well. He provided a real shot in the arm to the Cubs down the stretch, unfortunately. But I think that he would have been a really good addition to the Brewers infield mix going forward here in 2024 and even for the next couple of seasons.
And on top of that, I almost feel like we are starting to be too reliant on prospects. So if you're in a rebuilding stage, not giving up on prospects or trading them away prior to them reaching the major leagues and letting them play the first couple of years of their career, see if they are anything, makes perfect sense. But when you're a contending team, you should be using these prospects that you don't deem like top tier, like Jackson Trio and others. You should be using them as trade bait to improve your current roster, in my opinion. And it just feels like we're not doing that at all. And not only that, it's just a head scratching deal, like getting rid of Hauser and Taylor, just to free up some money for I don't even know what. I mean, it was obviously a cost cutting move. I have a hard time believing that we initiated that. Like again, we did it with the Mets. David Stearns just left our organization. I'm sure he was interested in those guys, and he probably reached out to Arnold and said, what do you want for these guys? And they're like, oh, well, Mark doesn't really want to pay him anyway. So, like, I don't know, give me a list of prospects you're willing to part with for them, and then I'll pick one. I mean, I don't know for sure. That's what I'm speculating here. How it went down, but that's sure as heck what it feels like, and it's pretty pathetic in my opinion. So.
Yeah, man. Again, it kind of comes back again to not having a plan. I would like to talk to you about somebody that I've seen a lot of talk about on social media. Our interns are reporting this all over X right now about, and you've got people chiming in both pro and con about Tyler Black. Do you think that Tyler Black is going to be ready to take on a starting role in 2024, or I guess at any point in his career? He had obviously really good numbers last year in AAA, but there was an article that was circulating on social media that I think was put out by some of our colleagues on BrewerFan.net that talked about how he has some some pretty serious holes in his swing that will probably be exploited by major league pitchers that aren't necessarily being exploited by pitchers at the AA or AAA levels. What are your thoughts on Tyler Black if indeed the Brewers are going to go into 2024 with him maybe as our starting third baseman?
Yeah, when we drafted him as second baseman out of college, I thought it was a pretty good pick. His power really profiled as a nice potential fit at second base. I think his offensive projections are kind of mediocre for a third baseman. And I guess if he's got a good bat, we got him to get him in the lineup in some way. However, I will say that I'm a little bit lower on Tyler Black than most of the industry, especially for Brewer fans. And I don't want to label him as anything like a potential bust or anything, but I'll just put it this way. For every one Ryan Braun, there's probably like 39 Matt Gammels of the world. So I think he's probably somewhere in between, but closer to the Matt Gammel end of this. And so, again, he seems like someone that would be a real perfect trade chip. With that being said, if we could I would prefer to trade Willie Adames, slide Bryce Trang over to short, who I think he's a phenomenal defensive player, and I value that greatly as a shortstop on the team. I'd rather do that and then put Tyler Black at second base, to be quite honest, because I think his bat will profile as more above average there, and then sign a free agent third baseman or trade for one or something. And I think our offense will be better with that setup. And then, or depending on what we get back for Adames or whatever. But apparently we're not doing what I'm thinking of. So with that being said, I mean, to answer your question, I do think that Tyler Black will do fine. He does have a really nice hit tool, some power. He had a great year at AAA last year. I do think it's like I said, I don't expect him to be a all-star level player by any means, but I think he'd be a solid contributor. But as a rookie on a contending team, I'd prefer not to have him be handed an everyday starting position. Obviously, he'd probably have some competition one way or another. But no, to answer your question, I'm not 100% comfortable going in the 2024 season with Tyler Black as a starting position player. No.
Yeah, I tend to think that that's what the Brewers are kind of setting themselves up to do, to be totally frank. And I obviously could be wrong about that, and I don't know that I don't know that I'm correct, but my guess is that, because this is an organization that seems so dedicated right now to saving money, despite the fact we already have a lower team payroll than we did in 2023. My guess is that we're going to go with Tyler Black at third, and whether or not we trade Willie Adames, I've been of the mindset that we should also trade Willie, depending on who we get back. Obviously, you don't just trade Willie Adames just to trade him. In my opinion, I do think he still is a valuable, contributor to the team both on and off the field, but I certainly think he's replaceable, and I would be very okay with sliding Terang then over to shortstop. I hadn't really considered the Tyler Black angle and him going to second. I had been more of the mindset, that we could easily sign a guy like a Whit Merrifield, who I've been pretty high on for a while. I know that our co-host Scott is also high on Whit Merrifield as well, but I would like to see the Brewers at least bring in somebody like that, who I don't think is going to cost a ton. I think that somebody like a Merrifield could be had for a reasonable contract on a 2-year deal even, that wouldn't break the bank, and I think would be a really nice addition to the team and would allow you some flexibility with Terang's glove up the middle. So that would be my battle plan if we are going to go ahead and start Tyler Black at third. Now, if we are going to slide him to second, that's a whole other story, and then we really have to be, I think, way more proactive than we've been being on looking at third base options, because that would obviously have to be an external pickup if we're not promoting within.
Yeah, and now Tyler Black had a great year last year, but only 18 home runs that year, which is pretty good. Looking at his overall numbers as a minor leaguer, 23 home runs in 768 at bats.
Yeah.
As a minor leaguer, that's not a ton of power. However, he's shown quite a bit of speed in the minor leagues, even 55 steals last year. I don't think that's by any means his calling card, but I think could be a 20-25-ish player at the major league level. And his big thing is his on-base percentage over the course of his minor league career so far is over 400. So I do think that his hit tool is really good in his batting eye. So he could become a really solid, possibly borderline all-star level player. I just don't know.
I'm looking over some notes here that Scotty's interns gave me, and really it's like the combined hit tool, I think, is where he is pretty exciting in the sense that he can draw a walk and he can also hit for gap power, and he also has some pop in his bat. So I'm personally a little bit more excited and a little higher on Tyler Black than some, but that's not to say he's like a shoe-in starting third baseman in 2024 or a future all-star, but I do think that he's got the potential to actually be an all-star, and I am pretty excited to see what he can do at the big league level, and we'll see in spring training if he's there yet or not. But I do think that, for what it's worth, I do think that that's the Brewers' plan going into the season, and I do think that again, given the dearth of options, I think that he's probably going to be the starting third baseman on opening day, if I had to guess.
Yeah, and unfortunately, if I had to guess, it would be someone like Andrew Monasterio until Tyler Black has passed his cutoff date for the Super 2 status or whatever.
Unbelievable. But to your point earlier too, Craig, I totally agree with you that Andrew Monasterio was incredibly valuable for the 2023 Brewers, but he was incredibly valuable because he was a utility player who could play multiple positions. And the fact is you could plug him in at second or short or third base or even in the outfield and expect some, level of production. And I think that Monasterio is going to continue to be most valuable in that role. I think, that's exactly what the Brewers should have been looking at, a guy like Luis Urias in past seasons at, and kind of messed up by making him a starter. I think that Monasterio's best course and best strategy to stick around in the major leagues is going to be as that super utility guy who can get a lot of at bats, but kind of all over the field and not be a starter at one position.
Yeah, 100% agree on that. So also, I've heard people online say, "Oh, well, the Brewers saw some nice starting pitching depth," and then they went over. I feel like that isn't the case, especially with the fact that we could, potentially move Corbin Burns at any point if it's not this offseason, maybe at the trade deadline. I think that we need much more starting pitching depth. And I think that there's some nice guys in the organization, minor leagues, but besides Robert Gasser, I don't really feel like there's that many guys that are that major league level. ready. Another breakout prospect last year, AAA, was Carlos Rodriguez. He's someone who could get some innings. But again, for a contending team, you really don't want to have that many rookies eating up innings and getting major league experience if you're contending for a division title, which I fully expect us to still do. I mean, we're defending NL Central champions, for crying out loud. So, and then we're most likely already going to have Jackson Trio as a rookie starter at a position in the outfield. And do we want Tyler? I mean, having multiple players starting, and technically, I mean, Garrett Mitchell would probably be his first full year as a starter as well, coming off injury last year. So you've got a lot of guys who are really green, so to speak. And that mix with veterans can sometimes work, but it just feels like we're going to be very reliant on young players, young cheap players, and I guess that's what our organization likes. And every once in a while you can really hit it big on one of those, but it's more rare to find a franchise type player that way. I think that the Brewers feel that they have one, obviously, a Jackson Trio, so that's exciting. But these other guys, I think, are possibly fringe regulars as we're looking at. I hope that I'm wrong on that. I think obviously Garrett Mitchell and Marcel Freeland could be all-star level players. Joey Weimer, I think, is someone that it makes sense as a trade chip, or someone possibly who could have a breakout with the Brewers. I just don't know. But again, all these guys are very young, very cheap, and it just seems like that's the route we're going. And it's hard to argue. Some people are like, well, why do it's either that or turn through the bargain bin and give at bats to these, the Jake Bowers of the world or whatever, so to speak, are just like, veteran corner infielders who really don't even have power for that. Whatever. I mean, so we'll see. I just don't see a first baseman currently on the team that I'd be comfortable, or third baseman for that matter, to come into the regular season with. I'm just really getting kind of sick and tired of this organization completely punting on first and third base with bargain bin players, or players that don't even profile as having a good hitting tool for those positions, like a Louis Urias, So, I mean, we'll see. Hopefully Matt Chapman is, being signed as we speak or something. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
I just really
Matt Chapman's considered an upgrade. That's a problem. I'm not a huge Chapman fan, but Craig, to your point, I don't have a problem with the fact that we're bringing in this wave of prospect turn, major leaguers. We did that back in the day. We've done that with, the Ricky Weeks, Corey Hart, JJ Hardy, Prince Fielder Brewers. We've done it in the past, and then you make some significant additions like Ryan Braun a couple years later. So I'm not opposed to doing that. The problem is that you're then not spending the cost savings that you've gotten from going, younger and cheaper at multiple positions at the same time on other parts of the roster. I mean, obviously we've got some money tied up with Christian Yelich, and obviously Corbin Burns is expensive and, heading into an even more expensive year in arbitration, but that doesn't mean that you're really improving. It just means that you're standing pat in so many ways. So I really do agree with you that we've got to go out. We've got to get at least one of the two, a first baseman or a third baseman. I've resigned myself to the fact that Tyler Black could be an option, a good option at third base. So I'm okay with going into the year with one of those two positions not being filled by an outside acquisition. I am not okay with both of those positions being kind of pell-mell and whatever this year again, where it seems like we've done that every year since Prince Fielder left at first base, and I think we literally have. And we've done that many years at third base since we traded Aramis Ramirez back to the Pirates. So that's, I think, the 2015 season. So it's been a number of years now at this point for third base as well. So I'm really, really hopeful that the Brewers are going to be a little bit more aggressive in the coming weeks. And we've seen Mark Attanasio make a little splash prior to the Brewers Fan Fest in the past, which is coming up, I think, this coming weekend. Who knows? So I'm not necessarily expecting anything at this point. I don't want to get my hopes up, but it would be outstanding if the Brewers could go out and get a first baseman.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing I should point out is the Brewers did just avoid arbitration with Hobie Milner for just over $2 million for his second last year of eligibility, his arbitration eligibility. So that's
double
nice.
what he made last year. Yeah, that's double what he made last year in arbitration. So good for Hobie, but he certainly was a valuable member of our bullpen last year, coming in as one of the lefties that we could rely on. And a Texas Longhorn to boot. So yeah, that's outstanding. Glad to see that he's back.
Oh yeah, he was way back in the day. He was drafted way back in 2012 in the 7th round. In fact, here's a fun fact: his father, Ryan Milner, was actually drafted in the 7th round in 1978 by the Toronto Blue Jays.
Huh, did not know that. A lot of his family was actually in town for the Brewers series in Arlington last August. And if you remember, Lena and I went to that series to the entirety of that series actually, and we were able to talk to both Hobie and his family. There was a lot of his family members milling about in Arlington, and they were obviously still living here in Texas and very excited to see Hobie and the Brewers come to Milwaukee. So it was kind of fun to talk to his family for a bit during the Brewers trip here in August of 2023.
Yeah, no, his dad was a highly rated catching prospect way back around 1980, and he actually got a couple. He did make the show. He got 9 at bats in the big leagues. Had four hits and 9 at bats. That's pretty cool. That his son is
Wow.
part of the major leagues. So
I did not realize that his dad actually made the show. That's great. That is an exciting, cool thing.
yep. So all right.
Does dad go to UT as well? Is his dad a Longhorn?
That I don't know. We'll have to get Scott's interns in on that. I'm sure they could figure that out very quickly. But
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, and I didn't hear anything about either Hobie's arbitration being settled in advance by our anonymous source Tom Carter, which does surprise me a little bit. Tom is usually on top of these things, but it'll be interesting to see what other Brewers are able to settle before the arbitration deadline here in the coming weeks. I am hopeful that the Brewers are not going to have messy arbitration processes going on this year like we did last year with Corbin Burns. That would be a disaster. So it just seemed like it started the year off on a sour note, and I don't know. But you never know with this front office. Obviously, I'm a little pessimistic in terms of the overall direction of the franchise at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And Tom T. Carter, we hope that you're still around, giving us some inside information in spite of our misgivings, so to speak. So all right, well, yeah, look, hopefully something big happens soon for the Milwaukee Brewers. We're definitely looking forward to the winter being over at some point and spring training being on the way. So at some point before March, before spring training, we will come at you with we'll have to chime in with get some information from our longtime Brewers minor league analyst Brandon. Get our top 30 future Brewers for 2024. And go over our farm system, which I will say the Brewers farm system did have a phenomenal year in 2023. And they went from somewhere about middle of the pack to now pretty universally like top 5-ish farm systems in all baseball. So that's exciting for a team that's coming off of an NL Central championship. We really have the farm system of a rebuilding team, which is kind of nice. And so maybe the Brewers are trying to hang their hat on that. It just doesn't make sense to me if that's the route that they're going into a rebuild, why they wouldn't be trading Adames and Burns. But maybe they're gonna make one last go of it and then see where we're at in July. And that's what it sure seems like. But to me, they're doing it. If you're gonna do that, you should go out and try to at least make a run at it with some quality players this year, adding some quality players. And so far, that has not been the case this offseason. We've been pretty well documenting. So all right.
Yeah, and you could supplement some of these guys without signing like long-term deals with guys that you didn't necessarily want to commit all the financial resources to. Again, I think that we could get a number of guys on 2 to 3 year deals that maybe have a little higher average annual value, but who the Brewers can afford to sign right now, because we do have so many young guys on the roster, and we do have guys that are coming off of bigger deals. So the Brewers aren't going to be tied up financially forever. And again, the payroll is lower going into 2024 right now as it stands than it was in 2023. So I do think we've got the financial flexibility to do it. It's just, do we have the will?
And the Brewers front office has, in the last 5+ years, has had this knack of acquiring a surprise player at a position seemingly not of need. And for some reason, I feel like that's going to be the case this offseason. So I wouldn't be shocked if instead of an offensive player, we somehow sign a surprise starting pitching player or something like that. But we'll see.
Hey, I wouldn't mind some more starting pitching depth. I thought you were going to say you'd be seeing the Brewers maybe sign like a 6th or 7th outfielder or something, like the exact opposite of what everyone would say that we would do. So yeah, who knows? Maybe go out and get another all-star catcher or something.
Wouldn't surprise me. Would not surprise me one bit. So
you never know.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, Brewer fans, and thanks, Vince. And we'll be coming back with you here in the next couple of weeks. But in the meantime, Stay classy, Mark Antonasio, and go Brewers.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Scotty. Thanks, Craig. Go Brewers.